For this video, we're going to look at number 30 on the 4-3 worksheet. And I'm actually going to show you two different ways you can work this one out. And you can decide which way you like the best. Okay, now first I've written it just like it's shown on the worksheet that you have. And what we're going to do is we're going to treat this, we're going to treat the numerators and the denominators separately, and at the end we're going to reduce what we have. Okay? So when we multiply two fractions, if you remember, what we do is we multiply the numerator and then multiply the denominators. So let's start with the numerators. Now on this fraction right here, I have 8x squared y. This fraction is 15xy squared. Now the way we multiply those is first we multiply the coefficients. So we'll do 8 times 15. You may need to use a calculator for this, so go ahead if that's the case. 8 times 15 is going to be 120. Now we're going to look at the x's. We have an x squared and an x to the first power. Remember, there's a little imaginary 1 there. You can go ahead and add it if it helps. Remember, what we do is we take the 2 from this x and the 1 from this x, and we add those together. So 2 plus 1 is 3. Now we look at the y's. This y has a little imaginary 1 that you can add if you want. So I have a y and a y to the second power. So 1 plus 2 is going to be 3. So that's the numerators. When you multiply 8x squared y times 15xy squared, you get 120 x to the third, y to the third. Now we're going to put the denominator down and below that. You take 5 times 16. Again, use a calculator if you need to. 5 times 16 is going to give us 80. So now what I have is 120 x to the third, y to the third over 80. Now that can be reduced. And the way we're going to reduce it is we're going to look at the coefficient of the term on top, and we're going to look at the number on the bottom and see if there's a common factor that I can divide both those by. Now I can do it in multiple steps, taking smaller numbers and dividing the top and the bottom by smaller numbers if I want, or I can look for the biggest number that I can divide both the top and the bottom by. If I look for the biggest number, it's going to be, do you know? It's going to be 40. 120 can be divided by 40, 80 can be divided by 40. So I can take 120 divided by 40, and you can use a calculator if you need to. That gives you 3. Now the x to the third and the y to the third are not going to change, so they're going to still be there. Down on the bottom, I have 80 divided by 40, which is 2. So this problem up here, 8x squared y over 5 times 15xy squared over 16 ends up being 3x to the third, y to the third over 2. Now that's not the only way you can do this though. Here I'm going to show you the second way you can do it. Now I've written this one slightly differently, and when you're doing your homework, if you want to do it, that's fine. Instead of writing the parentheses to show multiplication, I've just written the dot. Remember, the dot shows multiplication too. It's one of the other ways that we can show multiplication. Now before I multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator like I did over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and reduce first. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to look at the coefficients on the top and the numbers on the bottom and see if there's any common factors that I can divide some number on the top by and some number on the bottom by. Now if I look at this 8 and this 16, both of those numbers are divisible by, that's right, by 8. So I'm going to divide 8 by 8, and it's going to turn into a 1. Now I can cross that out, and I could write a 1 there if I wanted to. But as you remember, a 1 in front of this doesn't really mean anything. So actually, I don't really need to write that 1 at all. I'm going to divide my 16 by 8. So that 16 divided by 8 is going to turn into a 2. Now I look at this 5 and this 15. Do you know of a number that you can divide both 5 and 15 by? That's right, you can divide them both by 5, right? So 15 divided by 5, that becomes a 3. The 5 divided by 5 becomes a 1. You could either leave it blank, or if you like, you can write the 1 there. So now what I'm going to do, since I've reduced it ahead of time, is now I'm just going to simply multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. Now the numerator, I look at the coefficients first. The coefficient of this is a 1. It's not there, but it's imaginary, right? So 1 times 3 gives me 3. Now I look at the variables. I multiply x's times x's. X to the second times x to the imaginary first is going to give me x to the 2 plus 1, 3. Then I do my y's. I got a y to the first and a y squared. 1 plus 2 gives me 3. Done with the numerators. I multiplied that times that. So now I move on to the denominators. 1 times 2 gives me 2. So as you can see, same answer both ways. I'm not telling you one way is correct. It's your choice, whichever way you think is easiest. Do you like to reduce at the end like we did over here? Or do you like to reduce at the beginning? Either way, you got to reduce sometimes, and then you're going to multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator, and that'll give you your answer.